Kyle, welcome to the podcast, mate.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So Jordan Peterson, he said once, a harmless man is not a good man. A good man is a very dangerous man who has it under voluntary control. Me personally, mate, I'm convinced that society needs the benefits of martial arts now more than ever. And I think we would have a much more peaceful society if more people trained in martial arts. Would you agree with that?
I would 100%. And that's not coming from a kid who grew up in a violent childhood or anything like that. I had a really good childhood. I had, a lot of love surrounding me, but working in my late teens through to my mid to late 30s, doing a lot of security and crowd control and working with some high profile people, I noticed how violent society is. And I noticed how, I guess I say to people, how willing one person is to be violent to another person with no disregard of the outcome. And I think without getting into too much of ethical and political discussion, I think there's probably a belief in the world that, like, if we wait long enough or try and be good ourselves, then things are going to change. I think that's great. But I'm a father of two teenage girls, and they will always be training and they will always be doing something because, unfortunately, I have seen firsthand what people are willing to do to other people out there in the world. And that's something that we can work towards as a society over the next however many generations to protect and uphold. But in the meantime, I'm going to protect my fortress, I guess you'd say.
Yeah, 100%. I think just people in martial arts generally have that self-control. They're able to exercise control when they need to, but they understand because they have the capability of violence, they understand what it's also like to be gentle. I mean, what do you think sets people apart who train in martial arts in their terms of ability to exercise self-control, but also walk away from violence?
I think if you're doing martial arts correctly with the correct coaching, because again, on an offshoot, you're only as good as the person that's coaching you. And it all flows downhill. If your coach is an idiot, then you're more than likely going to be an idiot. I think self-control is when you understand what you're capable of, you're not wanting to go to that spot unless you absolutely have to. People who are untrained, and the classic thing is you'll see two teenage boys up in each other's faces this far away, and you'll say, I would never do that. And people go, well, why wouldn't you do that? I said, because have you ever had your nose spread across your face from that sort of action? Yeah. So I think they understand what violence is capable of. For me, I say in a lot of the self-defense courses and protection and awareness courses we do, if I'm walking down the street and I see two males that have that are questionable in their appearance and, wearing the hoodies and the red TNs and all the rest of it, and I've got my kids with me, I'm crossing the road. And a lot of people will go, oh, why would you do that, being who you are or what you can do? I said, because I know that if we engage, I know where it's going to go. And I've got my kids with me, and if I can avoid any violence, then that's going to be the path I take. And I think that's the difference between a martial artist and and someone who's not trained. I think, generally speaking, you won't see a lifelong martial artist walking around and inciting violence or picking fights because they know what is going to happen. And I guess, when you see that stuff firsthand, you just don't want a part of it.
Yeah, you do, mate. And you know what? It's kind of sad too, mate, that I think people that are untrained and don't have that capability or skill to be able to handle themselves in the street, they need martial arts the most because you and I, we've obviously been training in martial arts for a long time. But we understand the reality of violence. We understand that if the shit hits the fan, yes, we will have to sort of intervene and defend ourselves, but also I think we understand the repercussions because look at the mass shootings that happen in America, and you know the people that do these horrific things. It's weak-minded, and people that are trained in martial arts that are capable of handling themselves, they're not going to hurt people. In fact, they're going to be a protector in society. It's that old Japanese saying, mate, it's better to be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war. But what inspired you to get into martial arts, Kyle?
um, it's funny, isn't it? As I said, I had a really good childhood. I had like, my struggles as a kid and all the rest of it. I grew up in a country town. To put it very simply, I didn't like team sports. Prior to starting martial arts, I started martial arts when I was just on 15, and I'm 48 now. I'm 49 in a couple of months. Prior to martial arts, raced BMX bikes competitively and
Oh,
loved that
wow.
because I just got to
Yeah.
rely on me, me, and me. I still got a mountain bike that I'll get on every now and then and think I'm 17 again. But and things like skateboards and that sort of thing. I just wasn't a team sport person. So I watched a lot of martial arts movies in the 80s, and I just simply, having never been in a fight in my life, I just wanted to do that. I loved the idea of the kicking. I loved the idea of the free flowing. And it was really simple. Like, it wasn't a bullying thing or anything like that. School for me was a lot of fun. So I just got started, and I just instantly clicked with it. And back in the 80s, there was no research, there was no internet. There was a club within a 5-minute walking distance in a community hall from where I was living at home, and it was a Taekwondo club, and I just got started in that. And I didn't know
That's
that Taekwondo
amazing.
was, yeah, I didn't know that Taekwondo was very kicking dominant. So I'm straight away going, oh, this is awesome, and I just started and kept going. And I just basically, and it's still to this day, I just enjoy information. So I kept going with Taekwondo until I was 17. I got my black belt in Taekwondo as a junior, and I moved to Brisbane in 1994. Found through pure chance, association, a martial art called Zendo Kai, which is a freestyle karate. Got started in that and still doing that to this day. Picked up Muay Thai a
Yeah.
few years later, and picked up Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Look, I officially started Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I did my first seminar with a guy called John Will, who a lot of people will know in
Yeah.
Australian Jiu-Jitsu. My first introduction to Jiu-Jitsu was 1999.
Oh, wow. You got in early, mate.
The only, like now, and it's fantastic. There's so many black belts in Brisbane alone. There was one BJJ black belt in Queensland that we knew of, and that was Daniel Lima. I think he'd
Daniel
not
Lima,
long
yeah.
come to Australia. But other than that, there was nothing. So yeah, and I officially sort of started with Gracie Jiu-Jitsu in 2001, and got my black belt in that. I think it was 2000, probably 2013. I think it was.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when I started, I think there was three jiu-jitsu clubs in Brisbane. So I think it's just been
Wow.
this thing for information, and I think it's still going to that day. But yeah, I sort of fell into working security as a 19-year-old, and it was funny. My karate coach will attest to this. He even tried to say to me, "I don't think you have the right temperament for it," because I wasn't ever a violent kid. I wasn't picking fights. I did not get in one fight in my entire schooling time. I didn't actually start getting in fights until I started working in security. Um,
Security. Yeah.
yeah, and it's just that, like you said before, about protecting. I think that is a big thing that has just always been, I guess, in my nature, just to protect, to look after people. And yeah, I loved it. I loved the, I loved what it gave me. You had the nightclubs in the early 90s and mid 90s in Brisbane, when the nightclubs were in their heydays, shutting at 5 a.m. and that sort of scene. That was hectic. But then working in concerts and festivals, and you had a band on your wall as a teenager, and then fast forward 15 years, you're sitting having lunch with them. Like that was cool. But yeah, martial
Yeah.
arts was always there. So and then just I made a decision in 2011 that I needed to sort of move out of that. So I started to teach, and it grew and grew and grew, and here we are, full time teaching for 12 years this year.
12 years. Yeah.
Mm.
And is Chikara Martial Arts, that's the name of your club.
Yeah,
That's
CMA.
your school. So you founded it? Yeah.
Yeah, so it started off in '96. My Zendo Kai instructor moved. He's from my hometown too, so he moved back to my hometown. So I took over the club, having no idea really of teaching, and same sort of thing. Like we had guys training at the club, and we only had probably about a dozen students at best. I didn't want to let them down, and I needed a venue, so we started. I started running the club in '96, and
Wow.
then we just kept going. So yeah, this is our what would this be? Now like our 28th year of coaching.
That's amazing, mate. And you must get so much joy in teaching, Kyle. And I'm sure you can think of numerous encounters of people that you've coached over the years that just had an amazing transformation. What do you love most about teaching?
I love the fact that you get an opportunity, if they are willing to, let people see what they're truly capable of. I could rattle off a dozen like success stories. Kids in particular, even adults, you get a 4-year-old girl that's arguing about doing push-ups because she's talking in class, and fast forward, and the values that you've put into that kid, she's now captain of the Australian women's rugby sevens team. You
Wow,
you
that's
have a
amazing.
10-year-old girl who's so timid she won't speak when she comes in. She's 17 and she's having a full Thai rules fight in a bar in Thailand and just walking through her opponent.
That's amazing.
You run into a kid in the supermarket who's now an adult, and they'll recall this conversation that they had with you about this, this, and this, and this, and they always hang on to that. And you go, yeah, that's great. And you can't remember the conversation, but it's been so important to them that they've hung on to that. And whether they call on that when they need to, muster up the courage to do whatever else is in their life. There's so many. Like, we work a lot now. I work a lot now with neurodivergent kids on
Right.
the spectrum, and that we sort of fell into that sort of work. But doing work with them one on one, they're doing things in classes or they're doing things one on one. How quickly these kids write themselves off, but you forget how much martial arts gave you when you started. Like we will get we can't look back now. Like for me, it's so long ago. Like when I got that first coloured belt, how good that felt. You give a kid a kid that's on the spectrum that has to be homeschooled because he can't interact with kids well. He's got so many other things going on in his head. You put a yellow belt in front of that kid and he starts crying because he goes, no one's ever,
Yeah.
he can't fathom that he's actually got that much worth, that he has achieved what he's achieved. That to me is so much more important than, and look, we have had good success in the competitive arena too, but that to me is so much more important than just having, I don't know, a bunch of alphas in the gym. Look, each
Yeah.
um, I'm not saying that if that's a priority to you as a coach, then that's great. But there's a movie called Miracle. It's about a guy called Herb Brooks, I think his name. He was the coach of the 1980 American ice hockey team that beat the Russians in the Winter
Okay.
Olympics. Um,
Is
And
that a Disney movie?
yeah, it's a Disney movie. Kurt Russell's the lead.
Yeah, I
So
think
it's a
I've.
true story. Herb Brooks, he was an amazing coach, but he was ruthless, and he took this bunch of college kids. He wouldn't recruit professional athletes. He wanted college kids because he wanted to mold them into the people. He didn't already want their egos. And there's a saying that he said. He said, "Good people first, good athletes second." I'm a
I love
big
that.
believer. I'm a big believer in attitude. Even with our
Yeah,
fight team now, our fight team is based your eligibility to stay in the fight team is based on attitude. You can kick down a barn door, you could be getting knockout after knockout, but if you're a dickhead, I don't want you in the team, because it's just
yeah,
attitude.
couldn't
It's
agree more.
attitude over everything, and that's
Yeah,
always been a big thing to me. We had a grading yesterday up the coast for our Zendo Kai and BJMA stuff, and I had a chat to some of the kids there. I'm looking at everything you do when you're not doing what you're told to do. How are you standing? How are you walking? How are you conducting? Because that to me was, as a 19-year-old kid working with some strong, capable men and women on doors in the 90s, I'd just look at the way they carried themselves and I want to be that. I want to do that. So yeah,
yeah,
that was huge to me,
yeah.
and I think that's the thing that I look for in coaching. How much can we how much can we change their lives? Because none of our students are going to be with us forever. And as I said, like that kid that's now playing professional rugby, I still keep in touch with her. Still keep
Yeah,
in touch with that family. Her brother played professional rugby as well. I still keep in touch with them because I think if you can form those sorts of relationships, that's very good as retaining your values. And I also now understand that
yeah,
after nearly 30 years of coaching, you aren't going to be everybody's cup of tea. If you train somebody and it doesn't work out because your values don't align with their values, that's okay. And same
yeah,
thing, if I have mates of mine that aren't able to get their kids to my gym, I'll just say, just go find a club.
yeah,
As long as they're training and you like
yeah.
that coach, and that's the thing where we're bagging other styles and people do that. I really don't do that because as long as your kids are doing martial arts, they're learning so much more than just punching and kicking. But coming back to it again, they're only as good as the person coaching them.
I love that, mate. That's fantastic, and what a remarkable achievement, and some powerful words of wisdom that you just shared, mate. Thank you so much for sharing that. I actually got goosebumps when you were talking. Yeah. It reminds me, I had a student of mine, and unfortunately, she came from a situation where she was sexually assaulted many years ago,
Yeah.
and also a DBA, domestic violence. And before she entered the club, she must have been driving around the complex for about an hour or so,
Mm.
contemplating and mustering up the courage to come in and train. And this student of mine, she eventually came in and she did her first class, mate. And then 4+ years later, she's training, she's thriving, she's just doing some amazing things in her work. And mate, I really sort of empathized and understood what you were saying, the joy that you get in teaching, the impact that you can make and really change people's lives for the better. It just
Mm.
has that positive ripple effect, and it must make you feel so good, mate. Would
Yeah,
you
it
agree?
does. It does, and I think it's learning to also you have that emotion. I'm trying to think of the words. You have that emotion for the people that you're training, and you develop. Some people you get a real connection. Like I for whatever reason I really have a connection with training. Probably I love training teenagers
Yeah,
because I see that my like young kids and teenagers because like I had a good childhood. I had a few like I had a some close family members pass away when I was young, and my father passed away when I was 10. So I needed that sort of male role model, and I had a couple of I had an uncle in particular and a grandfather that picked up the slack. So I think one thing for us these days in society, because we've got so many single parent families. We've got so many kids from broken homes. One thing these kids
Yeah.
don't know they need so much is a role model. And
Yeah.
for a lot of these kids, if you just, it's amazing what happens to a child or a teenager or an adult for that matter when they know that there is at least one person out there that believes in them. And I think
Yeah.
that's a thing that I say to a lot of newer coaches. You don't understand how much influence you have. And look, I've gotten it wrong sometimes. You would have heard the phrase "drink the Kool-Aid." You sort of get a bit high on your own supply.
Yeah.
You believe you're probably a bit better than what you are. And I've gone through that phase running clubs where, I wanted 1,000 students and I want this and that. And now, like I said, I'm staring down the barrel of 50. I just want now, I'd rather have this real tight bunch of people. And our community is something that I've always been proud of. Like
Yeah.
to be like, a coach and you're getting invited to weddings, tisms, like these family events, that connection that you have with your students, like as I said, there's some that it just doesn't work out, but like I said, I've got kids now that are adults that now are bringing their kids, and you just blink your eyes, and it's that amount of time that you've been able to invest in these kids.
Yeah.
And like you said before about your student, some of them, the lives they come from is just horrible. I work with a
Yeah.
women's shelter once a week, like rehab and DV, and just hearing their stories and just hearing that what they've had to go through, you just go, what you're doing to just step foot in here and just admit that you are going to put yourself under such vulnerability. That's admirable in itself. And that's why I say, like, if
Yeah.
you're a teenage boy, like, you would have the same in your gym. Probably once a month we have a teenage boy comes in and says he wants to fight in the UFC, and I say, cool, get on and do the warm up and the classes, and we'll go from there. Just to have, they see that amount of work, and it's good for them to have something to aspire to. But then you've got these neurodivergent kids, the mothers, these people that come from these horrible environments. Them getting through the front door is a win, and that's where you
Yeah.
embrace that sort of stuff. And I think as I get older now, I realize that's more important. I don't, if we have, and we've had champions and all that training at our gym, and the fighting is something that is we've gone through phases of it, and it's going through another big phase now. But I always say to people, fighting isn't the focus at our gym. Fighting is a focus. I wanna
I
have good
love
people.
that.
Yeah, I want to have good people.
Yeah.
That's these people that walk around with our t-shirts on and that sort of stuff. Like it's they're proud to put that t-shirt on. You know,
Yeah. Mate, I'm getting goosebumps talking to you.
because you're
It is.
cold.
It's fantastic. No, it's just I think I really can sort of understand and resonate. This is the joy that I find in teaching as well. You
Yep.
touched on something very important, Kyle. You were
Mm.
talking about role models. Me personally, mate, I think young men right now are confused more than ever
Mm.
because you and I, mate, we had the opportunity to grow up with some amazing role models. I started martial arts when I was 6, but it was from an introduction watching The Karate Kid and then
Yep.
stumbling across Bruce Lee, Jean-Claude Van Damme. We had all these action stars. I honestly think young boys are confused on how they should be as a man and embracing their masculinity. I think there's a crisis in masculinity.
Yeah,
Do you think that martial arts can help overcome this, especially with our young boys?
I do. The problem is it's getting them to just understand that they are vulnerable, I should say. The ego is something that they have to surrender to. I do a I do a fair bit of work with teenagers, and again, something that we've just fallen into. We'll have I've got a couple of teenage boys. that have recently come on board, and we do work with a lot of other teenagers. Things like just having a lot of trouble at home. I've got one teenage boy who's got some PTSD already from some horrible stuff that's happened to him. And I think them realizing that they don't have to, they don't have to put this mask and armor on, in particular to solve their problems. And like you said, them realizing that the choices that they're making now, they can and will affect the rest of their lives. I do a little scenario drill when I work with some high schools, all boys high schools, and we play out this little scenario. It's a bit long-winded to explain, but the point it explains is how you can make just one decision, snap decision, to try and give that impression that you're, in front of your friends, that you're good and all the rest of it. And that affects the life of up to 25, 30 people down the track, the King Hit situation and all that sort of thing. I think getting boys to learn that it's okay to fail.
Yes.
Getting boys to learn that it's okay to be wrong. I think that's very important. And the line that I use with so many teenage boys when we're doing this stuff is I'll just stop and look at them and go, the thing you forget is you look at me, but you forget that I was once you. I was a 17-year-old kid who thought he had all the answers. And like I said, I had a very good childhood. I was wild, and I think, I can see why my mother was losing her sanity with me at times, because it was just, there was, in our society now, like we've seen it, the youth crime, all that sort of thing. The problem is, without getting on my soapbox, the problem is we're losing our old school ability to actually not give these kids a clip around the ear. I think, that day is gone. But I think we need to get these kids to just stop for a second and really understand what they're doing. But you're right, it's role models. A mentor of mine, a guy called Dave Kovar, he uses a term that I use all the time: influence over authority. So, I'm a dad. If I say to my kids they need to eat healthy and they need to take care of themselves as I'm on the couch sucking down my third cheeseburger, they're not going to do that. Our kids are only as good as us that are parenting them. Nobody's a bad parent as such. We just can't always get it right, and there's no manual. But we have to also understand that sometimes our kids, we have interesting situations where a kid will be not listening at home, and the parents will come to me and go, so can you have a chat to them? They need to clean their room. They need to do this. They need to do this. It's like, all right. I thought I only had 2 kids. But that sort of influence is very important. I think, I don't know, we just need to also understand that, sometimes us as parents too, and us as adults, how much shit did you get right the first time? How many mistakes did you make? They're human, but again, it's pulling them aside. I had a kid recently just sparring, and he was just always hitting hard, always just trying to take off the other kids' heads in sparring. 20 years ago, I would have put on my gear and I would have touched him up. These days, I pull him aside, take him outside, and I go, what's wrong? What's happening? And he just breaks down in front of you and just goes, oh, I've got this going on and this and this and this. And I said, okay, let's not do any sparring for a little bit. Let's go and hit some pads, or let's do this. And just remember, the people that are in here, they're trying to make you better. Getting inside their heads is important. And him dropping that guard and actually admitting what's going on, that's huge for them.
Yes. Yeah. That's some profound wisdom, mate. And I think, this notion that is going on right now in society with the phrase toxic masculinity, this gets thrown around on the web, and it's so damaging. And I think kids now more than ever need role models. And you yourself, Kyl, obviously are a fantastic spokesperson to really educate these kids on the importance of self-control and discipline and camaraderie and benevolence, kindness. That's huge. And it really does. I like some of the nicest and kindest people I've ever met in my life train killers. They train in martial arts. Yeah. And it's so true, mate. It's so true. Yeah, these kids need role models. They really do, mate. Yeah, sorry, you go.
You keep going.
I was going to say, yeah. So have you ever had an encounter with a child or an adult or a teenager that sort of went off the rails a little bit, and then you were able to sort of bring them back in and just they can recalibrate? Like, I'm sure there must have been many instances like that where they're going down the wrong path, and then you impress upon them, look, if you keep going down this way, it's not going to be good. Is there a particular moment throughout your martial arts journey?
There is. There's one girl in particular who springs to mind, and I guess to protect her a little bit, I won't give the full story, but she, I sort of caught her at the right time. She was going down a very bad path and was probably on the verge of making some pretty poor decisions. I think the thing is realizing that you are capable of helping these kids, but on the flip side to that, realizing when you are not capable, but when you realize that it's going above your pay grade too. I think if you can be a precursor to these kids and adults realizing that they need to, not seek professional help as such, but there's other things in their life that need to get back on track, and you're a catalyst for that. I think that's very important. This girl's now doing great. She is really put herself together. She's fierce. And I think having that ability to just have been able to catch her, but then realizing that this is what you need to do. And then I think the other thing is realizing also, and back to that drinking the Kool-Aid expression, how much power you have in your hands. Every coach, I think, regardless of how long you're coaching, and if you don't admit to it, I think you're wrong, doesn't realize, how much power they do have in their hands, and how much your actions and what you say and what you do, back to that influence over authority. And this is something that I've really taken on board in the last 10 years, how much influence we have over people by just being ourselves. And it's the most simplest things. Like, I went through my years of partying and doing all that stuff and everything like that. Now it's Sunday morning. I'm sitting on my porch with a cup of coffee, and I'm just enjoying being that sort of person now. Because I think we had a situation with our club about probably six or so years ago where we were running through some stuff with the council, and we were having to move venues and all that sort of thing. And I remember my wife and I sat down with a person from the council, and it was very emotional because we were trying to work out a way that we could keep our venue, and it all worked out for the best. But the thing I said is, this club has changed lives. And then I said, this club has also saved lives. And I think that's the thing that we don't take fully into account. Like, to us on the outside, especially if we're a new instructor, we're teaching a few kicks and punches and all the rest of it. But like, they'll go home and talk about us more than they'll talk about their day at school, and we'll always, there's kids that I haven't trained for 20 years that I still talk to, we still communicate, and I still really hold this special place for them. And I think that's something that when we're starting out as a coach, we have no idea what's going to happen. I didn't think I'd be doing this for nearly 30 years. I had no idea.
That's amazing. Yeah, that's amazing, mate. Yeah, you just never know the impact that you can make in someone's life. And it really is that positive ripple effect. you just don't know. You don't know what someone's going through. But these people, mate, I'm sure they would be so appreciative and so grateful to have crossed paths with you, Kyle. And what a remarkable achievement on building a successful school, but just really empowering people to become better people. And I had the privilege of chatting with Richard Norton, is obviously, Richard Norton yourself. You
Ricardo,
trained with
yeah.
him, Ricardo, and he said to me a long time ago. He said to me, Kyle, never stop being a student, but it's also the hour that you spend on the mat, and also the 23 hours that you spend off the mat. It's those 23 hours that you spend off the mat, and whatever you do, you were saying just earlier with regards being a role model, but also showcasing that, eating well, training in martial arts, monkey see, monkey do. And yeah, it's the 23 hours off the mat that embodying the martial arts discipline. But have you ever had to use self-defense martial arts for real, Kyle?
Yeah. I yeah, and I think that's something that I do in my teaching, and I don't like we used to talk at work about the war stories. But yeah, in my 20 years I saw a lot of violence. I was involved in a lot of violence. I guess you could say I had to administer a little bit of violence. And I think that's something that I really like to keep in my teaching. When we're teaching, if I'm teaching a seminar or we're doing a self-defense group, one thing I'll say is, put your hand up. Or has anybody here ever had that moment where they're involved in a situation, a self-defense or a violent situation, where there's been that brief moment pop into your head where you go, I think this is it. I think I'm about to die.
Yeah.
And not a lot of people, thankfully, put their hands up. But yeah, you
It's
stop and you go,
terrifying.
yeah,
Yeah.
me. Probably to my best recollection, probably at least half a dozen times. Um,
Yeah.
and that's a really, it's a real good, it's a good situation to be down the track use, because I think one thing it gets you to appreciate the time you have. And same
Yeah.
sort of thing. I wouldn't call myself a violent person, but I would also call myself, I don't like losing and
Yeah.
I don't like dying. So yeah, like working one out in a pub on the south side of Brisbane, and you have a dozen bikies turn up and you've got to tell them they can't come in unless they take their colours off. That's something that, you stop and you go, this could go either way. And that's
Yeah.
where I think that martial arts side of things does kick in. Some of the, and I could tell that a lot with the people that I worked with. And that's something that it hangs onto you. I've had some horrible encounters, like, you've had the gun put in your face. I've had two bad instances with knives, stuff like that. And I think there's a difference between, dare I say it, bragging about that stuff, which I think some people do, and using that stuff then to go, okay, so when I did that, I tried this and that didn't work. So if I do this next time, and it was funny, like back in the probably late 90s and early 2000s, when I was right in the thick of doing stuff every weekend. And like, this is like, I was working inner city nightclubs 6 nights a week. I was then working concerts and festivals on the weekends, and then I was like an ops manager for the company that I worked for, and then we started working a lot more with the bands. And there was a point where there wasn't really a festival on the east coast of Australia that we weren't involved in. And back in the late 90s and 2000s, there was literally one of those every weekend. And
Yeah.
like Big Day Out and Soundwave and all these things. There was so much violence there. But the beautiful thing for us was I would do, we'd have the weekend, and you'd like literally the people you were working on, dare I say it, were like your guinea pigs. And then you go back to class on the Tuesday and go, so when this happens, don't do that because that didn't work. Do this, and this works a lot
Yeah.
better. So like and that's the thing. I think
Yeah.
you would be attest to it too. There's a lot of people out there who have done a 4-week self-defense course and now think they're superhuman. I've been doing martial arts for what, 30, 35 odd years next year, and I even still now get I don't like say doing knife and gun defense. I'm still on the fence about it because this is a real tricky thing and there's
Yeah.
so much that can go wrong. So I think
Knives are terrifying, mate.
yeah, especially when they're trying to put them in your stomach.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that you sort of go, and I think that's a good thing if you have a coach who is teaching you that stuff and is openly admitting, at the same time, if someone holds one of those things in front of you, just give them your wallet, just give them your keys. Like it's just a car, like
Yeah.
don't be a hero. So I
Yeah.
think, yeah,
Yeah.
I saw a lot of violence. I worked with a lot of men who I'm still friends with today, who I modeled myself off. There's nothing more terrifying than when you see, 3 guys coming up to a door at a pub or at a gate at a festival saying, "We're coming in." And the guy that you're working with is just so calmly just going, "No, you're not." And you just go,
Yeah.
this guy's confident. And that's the thing I modeled
Yeah.
myself off. And like you talked before about the benevolence, in our Zendo Kai methodology, the benevolence is the blue. So, I was always called the benevolent one. I was the one that in a situation was just a little bit more calmer. Like, okay, you can put him down now. Okay, get off him now. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's that
Yeah.
calmness. It's the calm in the chaos.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. It is. It's such a nerve-wracking experience. And
Hectic.
for anyone that's listening to this, just have a listen to what Kyle just said. And it is like you and I, we've been training in martial arts for a long time. And I'm a big believer that violence is never the answer, but sometimes it's the only answer. But there's a hierarchy of steps that we can work through before it gets violent. You made some really good points, Kyle. Your life is way more important. Hand over your keys, hand over your wallet. Who cares about your car? Your
Just a
life is more
car. Pay
important.
the excess and you'll be fine.
Yeah, yeah. And sorry, you go, Kyle.
No, you keep going.
You there?
Yeah, yeah, keep
Oh,
going.
yeah, yeah. So, do you teach your students the pre-fight, the during, and the post-fight? So, dealing with that adrenaline dump, especially because I think a lot of martial arts schools they don't teach the self-defense that I think is important. Because being able to manage your emotions under stress and assimilating something that I guess would be beneficial if they had to use it for real. Because I've worked with knives and I've pressure tested certain techniques, and it's a scary environment, actually having someone go ballistic on you and you have to try and defend for real. But how do you help your students deal with the pre-fight, the during, and the post-fight, dealing with that adrenaline dump that you get?
It's funny. We do this probably if I'm doing a self defense or awareness course or something like that, and it's and when I work with these women in the women's shelter that I work with, I think the pre-fight and the post-fight are much more important than the middle. Dare I say it? The middle's the easy bit. The middle's, without sounding arrogant, the middle's the fun part. The pre-fight is the most important thing. Like how you stand, where your eyes are. I have a thing like I grew up in the country, and my uncle, who was my uncle and auntie, who were very good to me, owned a cattle farm. And I always remember him being this proud cowboy, and he just walked with his chest out like he was carrying his 6 guns. And he didn't always have a rifle under the seat of the truck. But I use a term to the girls when I'm working with them. I say, walk like a cowboy. So have that chest up, have that chin up, have those eyes up, take your hands out of your pockets. Because the big thing is, if you can do all that and you can work on your de escalation and all these little things like that, you don't have, maybe the middle part doesn't happen, And I think, again, each to their own. And like I said, I'm never going to tell anyone in martial arts that what you're teaching is wrong. But my belief is if we can get that front part or the first part really down pat and really work on that de escalation, managing our emotions, managing our adrenaline, just being used to having somebody close in our space or being able to push them back or whatever, maybe we don't need to get to the middle. And
Yeah.
that's where I think, and then the post fight, we're still scanning and all the rest of it. Simple things like, like someone's doing knife defense and they take them down or they do a disarm, and then I say, once the knife hits the ground, where do you put it? I kick it away. And I say, cool. So you just kick it to one of his mates to pick up and stab you with. I said, like, you think about every little piece, and that probably
Yeah.
that security and door experience, like those those bikies that turned up to that pub, I managed to get them to take their colours off. I managed to get them to, do all that. It took about 35 minutes of negotiation and talking back and forth, but I managed to do that as opposed to me going, oh, fuck you, and just start hitting. I would have got killed,
Yeah.
And I think that's the
Yeah.
thing that we need to make sure that our people that we're coaching understand, regardless of whatever ability we're and techniques and capability we're giving you, you are not bulletproof. And
Yes.
as
Yeah.
that guy Bruce Lee used to say, the best way to avoid a fight is not be there in the first place. If you're, and
100%.
like you said, yeah, coping with that butterflies in the stomach, and I said, like your body and the chemicals in your brain, like they're very complex things, and if you're just sitting there going, this doesn't feel right, I need to get out of here, get out of there. You know, it's that
Yeah.
if you end up thinking, oh, that was a bad call, whatever, I'd rather be talking you there than afterwards. My one thing my uncle always used to say, I'd rather be tried by 12 than carried by 6. So
Oh,
that
wow.
that sort of thing is like, if you think this is, I need to do this, I need to do something now, do it. I'd rather you make a
Yeah.
kind of poor decision, or you go, maybe I went a bit too far, or maybe that wasn't that bad. But yeah, it's a hard thing because I think the pre-fight is something that we skip. If someone throws a punch, what am I going to do there? Well, what if you can talk them down? Like, little thing that I say to the girls that I work with, if you're talking somebody down, just your use of words. Don't say sorry. The second you say
Yeah.
sorry to somebody, especially in a DV situation, you're empowering them. Say anything but sorry.
Yeah.
That must be terrible for you. Look, I say, I'm just gonna move away. I'm gonna go back to my car. I'm gonna do this, whatever. But yeah, the those years of de-escalation and handling that adrenaline dump are big. We do a lot of pressure testing with our Zendo Kai and our Krav Maga group, even the Jiu-Jitsu guys. I'm a big, and the Muay Thai as well. Obviously, they do a heap of sparring, but I'm a big believer in volume in our training.
Yeah.
So we have nights where, for a 90-minute class, I'll just put the clock on and we just do 5-minute rounds for the whole night. And I believe that sort of stuff is very important because they're learning to deal with fatigue, they're learning to deal with everything not working. And for me, like, I don't judge your capability in your first or fifth round. I want to see what you're like on your 10th or 12th round. How are you holding
Yeah.
up? How are you able to control your emotions? When everything you're throwing is going wrong. Um, and I think that's the big thing. And you've got to, within reason, try and replicate the situation as best as you can, inside as to outside. And this is what I say to people: hitting somebody in sparring is a lot different to somebody having to hit somebody to put them down on their ass and them hitting you back. They're hitting you to try and hurt you. And that's a big, big difference.
Yeah. There's a video that circled on the internet a few years ago, Kyle. I don't know if you've seen it. It was an elderly gentleman who I believe teaches out at Eric Paulson's gym in America. He was talking about verbal jujitsu. And the gentleman was talking about a situation that arose where a fight happened and this guy hit the other guy. The guy fell down and hit his head on a planter and died.
Yep.
And he's now in jail for manslaughter. And there are many things that can be done to avoid a situation like that. And he gave some examples like, if you're in a bar or a nightclub or something like that and someone bumps into you and says, "Oh, what's your problem?" You can diffuse the situation with your words. He used an example saying, "My dad died last night and, my wife left me and, now I've got to, I'm in debt," and it just diffuses the whole thing. You can kind of, in a sense, make shit up, if that makes sense, but you can
100%.
diffuse it. You can use your words. And I can recall many times where I've used my words to diffuse the situation. Do you talk about that with your students?
100%.
Verbal jujitsu?
100%. And also just being willing to talk to people. Like I used to see, I said like some of the, I was probably, back in working in the teams and that, I was the younger kid of the group, and I had a lot of older role models. And I just used to watch the way that these guys would talk to anybody. That they just little things like just your tactile sort of stuff, like they just sort of pat someone on the back, or like, this person who 5 minutes, someone walk up and they're like, "Oh, this guy's so aggressive, I don't, we're going to have to drag him out." Then another person would walk in and 5 minutes later or 10 minutes even, they walk out, they're shaking hands, they're almost exchanging numbers to go out for a coffee. Like, it's just having that. I think patience is a good thing too, but just also understanding, like you said, that the biggest asset you have when it comes to defending yourself is your voice. And if,
Yes.
there's a big difference. Like, I could, say now, "James, you're a shithead." Or I could go, "James, you're a shithead." It's the same words. I'm just saying it with
the same thing. It's how you word it.
different outlook, different attitudes. And I think that's the thing that we forget. There is nothing more dangerous than a man or a woman or person who knows how to use their body, but knows how to use their voice. And I think, that's the thing that I work on. I work with security teams still now, doing consulting and doing training. And we do just an hour, hour sessions in our courses that we do just on de-escalation, just standing, standing on angles, how to talk, where you should situate your hands, and just all that sort of stuff, because you can tell so much. And again, dare I say it, generally speaking, a lot of those guys that will do this big shoulder charge and all the rest of you put the pressure back onto them, they generally crumble pretty quickly. And again, no one's, like I said earlier, the reason people let other people stand up in there is because they haven't had their nose spread across their face yet. Once that happens, they'll never do that again. And that's, I think, where the good thing for us is experience is that good teacher. So I can, for a lot of the stuff that I teach, I can say, I don't do that, not because I saw that on YouTube, but because I did that once and it went really bad. So do this instead. And I think that's, if you are wanting to find a good coach, find a coach that is willing to use themselves as a guinea pig, and keep coming back to it. I don't get it right all the time. There's stuff that that was horrible, don't do that again. So I'm still learning as I go with coaching as well. We all make mistakes.
Yes. Kyle, talk to me about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, mate. You're a third degree black belt in BJJ, but talk to me about your first introduction into Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, because I sure as shit remember my first introduction, mate, because I came from striking arts and,
Mm-hmm.
I love all martial arts. It doesn't matter if it's striking or grappling. And I remember my first experience in Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, but can you talk to me about your experience?
Yeah, it was humbling. So as I said, I did a few seminars with John Will, and that was really good, and it sort of lit the fire. But then I sort of wanted to find a club, and again, I was very uneducated. Like I'd watched UFC on videotape. Out of that, kids, that's like a square thing that you used to put into a machine and you play it. I I found per chance a club because I was still working in nightclubs. I found a club that had a class on a Saturday afternoon. So I went, all right, I should be out of bed by 2 o'clock. So I'll go and do that. It was a guy called Darren McKeon. He was a purple belt at the time under Pete Devine, who is now still my instructor. He's my instructor now. So I've been with Devine, Gracie Jiu Jitsu since I started. Daz was a purple belt. I went in there. I'd contacted him. I went in, did a class. He hadn't long moved from Torquay up to Queensland. He had a very tatty purple belt on. He was probably 70 kilos wringing wet. I was a solid fella. I was a third degree in Zendo Kai at the time. I was working doors 6 nights a week. I went in there. Everyone else was a white belt. So I'm thinking, no, I wasn't arrogant, but I was confident. I thought I'll be okay. I got fucking destroyed. I got absolutely destroyed when they rolled. Um, and
Yeah.
like some of those people are still around now. Like one of the guys in that class was Adrian Payne, who runs Integrated MMA now. So like there's still people that are around, and I'm still friends with other people that were in that group. But I think maybe the difference with me compared to others, I did that and then literally went, fucking, where do I sign? Where do I sign? I think back in the, like, that was 2001. And for the first couple of years, I was only able to probably do one session a week because I was still working nights. I was still running my own club. So just to get there once a week, and it was funny because, as I said, there was literally bugger all jiu-jitsu around Brisbane at the time. I think there was 3 clubs, and literally 6 months in, you were superhuman. Like you're showing this stuff in
Yeah.
classes, and people are going, "What the fuck is this?" So I remember using it on, and again, you do it in classes, and then you go and work on the weekends, and that was your testing ground. Oh, this works, this works,
Yeah.
this works. Like you're putting people up. So the jiu-jitsu really helped me from a working point of view. But yeah, I think it took me a little while to get my blue belt because I wasn't training terribly frequently. But yeah, when I got my blue belt, that was almost something that you could put on a resume because like it was
Yeah.
like, you were like, oh, fuck, you're a blue belt in jiu-jitsu. And even then, people were starting to kind of flock a little bit. But the thing that I've always kept with my jiu-jitsu, again, because of my background, I think there's competition and there's tactical jiu-jitsu. I am a big believer in trying to marry the two together. So I work with a lot of police. I've worked with all levels of police, the security guys. My jiu-jitsu is I am wanting to get you onto the ground. I'm wanting to hold you down, and I'm going to either break something or be able to subdue you down on the ground. I'm not
Yeah.
a guy that's teaching too much stuff going, oh, if you do this, you'll get the 4 points for mount. If you do this, you'll get that. But these days, again, we've got a lot of guys now competing. So I sort of switch between the two worlds a little bit. But I've seen I've seen a bit of the stuff you do online, like using hoodies for chokes, and I remember putting I remember putting a guy to sleep at a near riot we had at a Daft Punk concert. using the straps of his camelback and doing a cross lapel choke with that. So
Wow.
it's like, and this is where you
Wow.
do this stuff and you go, that fucking works, you know? So, yeah, I like the transferability with my
Yeah.
back. With my back and neck, you're probably not going to see me doing any inversions in jiu-jitsu anytime soon. I've got a couple of younger purple belts that are right into that shit, so they can teach that, but I'll teach you how to,
Yeah.
roll a guy over, and this is how you separate his shoulder from his body. So I've always loved the power of
Yeah.
jiu-jitsu, but one big thing for
It's an
me,
amazing art.
it
Yeah.
is, and it's an art that a lot of people, I think they're not patient enough with it. You know, I've been doing this for 6 months. Why aren't I any good? Because you've been doing it for six
Yeah.
months. That's why. You know,
It's a
they think they're a
marathon,
bad
not a
person.
sprint.
Yeah, I'm not getting this right fast enough. I always call it a patient person's martial art. And that's no
Yeah.
disrespect to anything, but
Yeah.
it's a martial art where you've got to do it for a long time before you actually go, I think I'm getting my head around this now. But yeah, the founder of Zendo Kai, a guy called Bob Jones, who I'm very close to, I always remember him saying about another person in the style at the time in the 90s, him saying, this guy's the most complete person that we have in Zendo Kai. And he was just starting to muck around with the ground stuff, a guy called Rod Stroud. So for me, that's always been a thing. I took that on board as like an early 20s. I just want to be complete. If we're standing up, let's go. If we're on the ground, let's go. If you've got this in your hand, let's go. If I've got this in my hand, let's go. And that's where I think if anyone is saying that they're bored doing martial arts, you're not making yourself vulnerable enough to learn, and
Yeah.
you're not willing to basically, and one thing Richard talks about so much is unfolding your arms and getting to work, and also putting a white belt back on. I've done that 4 times, and I love doing it. I muck around with another
Yeah.
Russian martial art called Sistema. I've been mucking around with that for about 11 or 12 years. I would call myself far from good at it, but I incorporate a lot of the flow from Sistema into the Jiu-Jitsu. A lot of the close stuff from Jiu-Jitsu I put into our clinching in our Muay Thai. And I always say, who are the best guys at clinching in our Muay Thai school? The guys who do Jiu-Jitsu as well, because they're putting the two together.
Yeah.
The guy who won his fight last night in Muay Thai, he's also a purple belt in Jiu-Jitsu. And one of his
Oh,
favorite things to
wow.
do is clinch.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
marrying they're all together. So I think that's important.
Yeah. The thing I love most about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, Kyle, is it deals with an altercation in a more humane way.
100%.
And I've always been fixated on self-defense. I've never been one to gravitate towards competition. I've always been fascinated with self-defense. And I think it's just such a huge impact that Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu has had on the martial arts community, because you do need to understand striking. You do need to understand if you have to deal with multiple attackers. God forbid if you had to break up an altercation at a house party, or your drunk uncle is getting a little bit out of hand. You don't want to do a 50 move Carter on his head. We can diffuse the situation. We can take him down without throwing a single strike, and hold him down and calm him down. And you know what, mate? This is fantastic for children, because unfortunately, mate, we do have a bullying epidemic. And I think Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is fantastic for kids. Do you do a lot of work with children, mate, in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu?
Yeah, like we have kids karate classes, we have kids Muay Thai, kids Jiu-Jitsu. They all hold the same values. The kids Jiu-Jitsu is good for the kids, especially the neurodivergent kids we found, because it's so tactile. Like they're just, they're able to judge how good they're going by where they are in space. So that proprioception stuff is very good for them. It's also good to teach kids that if somebody tries to hit you, then hitting them back is not the answer. But like you said about, the the violence and the hitting and all the rest of it. It used to be funny, like I worked with a lot of guys who fought Muay Thai in the 90s and early 2000s, and we used to joke like their way of breaking up an incident was a jab, cross, an elbow, and a leg kick, whereas we would come in and we would do the wrapping and that sort of thing. So it was interesting to see that contrast of
Yeah.
the methods to solve it. Don't get me wrong, if I shaped up to some of those guys, they'd mess me up, but just their different methodology.
Yes, yeah. I love all martial arts, mate. I love jiu-jitsu. I love striking arts. The thing with Brazilian jiu-jitsu, especially in a bullying sense for children, yeah, as I said, it deals with an altercation in a more humane way. And it's the only martial art on the planet where the little guy can beat the big guy. You know, we saw this in the early days of the UFC when Hoist Gracie was defeating giants. But it's interesting, mate. You know, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu sometimes gets a bad press online. You know, never go to the ground against multiple attackers. It's a death wish.
100%.
All right, well, that's fair enough. But what if you get taken to the ground against your will? Okay.
100%.
What if you do end up on your back and someone's on top of you? What if you work in law enforcement? What if you're a police officer and you have to detain and arrest a suspect?
100%.
You know, what happens if they grab a hold of you and you can't get away? You need to know. What if you're confined in an elevator? What if you're confined in a
Totally.
car
It's all
or
about
something like
positioning.
that? Talking about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and, you know, some of these trolls online that say, you know, they put shit on Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu saying never go to the ground against multiple attackers. It's a death wish. And then, you know, what if you get taken to the ground against your will? So, I mean, what do you
I
say to
think
people that are just ignorant?
I think the thing is, it's probably back to what I was saying about our experiences. The thing that opened my eyes up, that kind of got me interested in giving this jiu-jitsu stuff a go, was getting taken to the ground, was falling over, tripping over, like, and I think that's the ignorance is exactly that. Like you said, you're getting people making these statements. Okay, mate, so when was the last time you had three guys on top of you and you were underneath, curled up in the fetal position, trying to just survive? When did that last happen to you? And you know, like you're trying to negotiate somebody who doesn't want to move, and it's 3 o'clock in the morning on the floor of a nightclub, and there's God knows what on the floor. It's slippery. You've just got to slip, trip over your own feet, bang, you're on the ground. And this is, you know, I'm like working with, I'm working with a few people who are in the police academy at the moment being recruits. And, you know, we're working on situations with them where they are on the ground using jiu-jitsu to get back to their feet. So it's not things like not things like big sweeps or, again, open guards or anything like that. How do I get off the center line, push off the head, get back to my feet, do a technical stand-up of sorts and get back to my feet so I can put them on the ground? And I think that's the thing that anyone, again, who bags the shit out of jiu-jitsu just hasn't had that happen to them yet. And I mean, like I've got, you know, you know, vice versa. Someone who does jiu-jitsu saying that stand-up is shit. You know, they've all got their place. Like I've rolled with world champion kickboxers and submitted them, but I'm not standing up with them. You know, like if you know, then that goes straight back to the old back in the 90s when, you know, you'd get a blue belt taking a kickboxer to the ground and then submitting them. They're doing that because they're putting them in their own world. And the other thing is, you don't
Yeah.
get a choice. It's like, how much in classes do we practice getting attacked from someone who's right-handed and left-handed? You know, like the percentage of people who are right-handed, and then you get a left-hander, you don't stop mid-confrontation and go, hey, mate, can you put that in your right hand? Because I've been doing more of that in class. No, like
Yeah, yeah, that's so
that's, I
true.
think, where we have that ignorance is, unfortunately, it will never go away. But the big thing is you making sure that you're not doing that in your club. And if you are able
Yeah,
to, you can, if you're good at what you do, you will be able to dispel that ignorance within seconds because they will see what you can do and go, boom. Like I was working with some under Kai black belts yesterday and we were talking about just basic rear naked chokes and all the rest of it. And they're going, I said, how long does it take to put somebody to sleep with a choke? And one went, 4 seconds. I said, if they're fighting and you're trying to do it to them, it can take up to 45 seconds by the time you get that in, sink that in and go for it. I said, that's the difference with that struggle. And I said, it's something that you don't want to put into too much into your teaching, but how many of you here have actually put somebody to sleep? That first time you do it, it's terrifying because suddenly they're fighting. Next minute they're heavy, and I have seen firsthand people do that and they drop somebody. So they're not getting hurt from the choke; they're getting hurt from hitting the bitumen. So I demonstrated on one of my trusted students there, and just said, and warned him and said, this is going to feel a little bit weird. And it probably, as soon as he went heavy, I released it. Pardon, you're right. He's going, yeah, I'm back. And I said, that's the difference between understanding what's real and what's shit. And I am a big believer in basics. You will never beat a person in a fight who has solid and strong fundamentals. You will never beat a person like one. I watched a match recently. It was, if you know your names, it was Nicholas Merigali and Wagner Rocha, and who's number one.
Yep.
If you watch that match, everything that Merigali used to beat Rocha and submitted him, you would see in a fundamentals class. He did an arm drag, he got the back, he held the back, transitioned to an arm bar. You would teach that to white belts in a beginner's class. But the difference is he had done that thousands upon thousands of times. It was instinctive. And that's where I think we forget with our learning.
Yeah. And a good example is Hodger Gracie versus Peshesha, Kyle. And if you watch that match and you see the hierarchy of steps Hodger Gracie did and the way that he transitioned and got to his back and strangled him with a cross lapel choke, and it's all foundation or fundamental Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Yeah, like what you said, mate, you just can't beat the basics. And if you can get good at the basics, I mean, it's impressive some of what these people could do with Barambolos and, some of the 10th planet system that they do. It's amazing. But if we're talking about the foundation of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, what it was purely designed for was for self-defense and understanding that you can't beat the basics, and you can get extremely good at the basics. Hodger Gracie is a world-class jiu-jitsu practitioner. Most of his fights are usually, cross lapel choke from the mount, or if it's some sort of lapel choke from the back. Basic stuff that you teach white belts.
Yeah, and I think Pete, my instructor, is very good. He's known Hodger since he was like a baby, and interacting with Hodger, somebody like that. And this is like Hodger almost gets sometimes criticized about his basics, and it's like it's the same as like my students say to me, like, you've been getting us with the same shit every time. Like, you get this, it's always the same shit. And it's like, well, I keep getting you, so why would I stop fucking doing it? Like, I'm doing the same Americanas on people, like, an Americana, if, for example, or like even a rear naked choke or any basic movement. The triangle that I do now is nothing like the triangle that I learnt at a John Will seminar in 1999. That's no disrespect, but there's 23, 24 years of this to this to this to this to this. And then you look at somebody like Hodger, he is getting a basic movement as close to perfection as you can get. And he is able, there was that one, it's years ago now, but there was like that one world championships that Hodger basically did the same movement to every single match, and he got an Ezekiel every time. And again, you learn an Ezekiel in your white belt, you teach your white belts Ezekiels. That's a thing I will say to the guys as well, is if you do have a call to action, or whatever you want to call it, and you have to defend yourself, you will be using in that fight stuff you learnt in probably the first 3 to 9 months of classes. You won't be doing, and look,
Yes.
that's, and this is again, it's the inversions and all that sort of stuff is great, and to see how far jiu-jitsu has progressed, even in the time I've been involved in it, it's amazing. Like it's grown
It is. Yeah.
exponentially, but this is just evolution. Like as I said before, like I love skateboards, so like I'm still following skateboarding. Like you look at, there was a 16-year-old girl about a month ago that pulled off a 900 on a vert ramp. It took Tony
Oh,
Hawk,
wow.
yeah, it's a Gold Coast girl. It took Tony Hawk
Oh,
10 or 11 years of trying, and he was 34 years old when he got that trick.
yeah.
16-year
Yeah.
old girl doing it now. As soon as somebody
That's
sees that something
insane.
else can be done, and this is what Tony Hawk, I was lucky enough to meet him earlier in the year. As soon
Oh,
as he did a
wow.
trick, as soon as he did a trick, people were doing it a week later because they saw that
Yeah.
somebody could do it. And this is the thing, like if we focus on those fundamentals, it is so important. But I think one thing, and I say to newer coaches, don't fall into the trap of trying to teach them all your knowledge every single class. And that was one
Yeah.
thing that I love about jiu-jitsu is you're just teaching one technique. Like I remember doing Muay Thai classes, you'd do one combo the whole night and you'd like repeat that combo for 3 or 4 classes when I trained at other Muay Thai gyms when I was younger. I'm still able to recall those combos. I still use those combos. That's 20 plus years ago because they're just embedded.
Yeah.
I think Western society, we always are trying to impress. Training in Thailand a lot, like they're throwing like just round kicks. Like they're not trying to do these whiz bang techniques, but the big thing is the repetition. We'll have a guy go over to
Yeah.
Thailand with us. He does 10 days of training twice a day, hitting pads. He comes back. Everyone else in the class is looking at him going, what the hell's happened to him? And I just said, repetition is the mother
Yeah.
of all improvement. It's the mother of all improvement.
100%.
You just
Yeah.
reps. This is where I
Yeah.
think the guys that come into classes and go, all we did tonight was rounds. You didn't teach us anything. Yeah, I did. I taught you how to handle fatigue. I taught you how to handle pressure. I taught you how to handle your emotions because you can see like they get into those few rounds and nothing's working. They get the shits. They try and start to rip things on. I'm teaching you arguably more than just teaching you a bunch of technique. And again, each club to their own, but we always focus from a jiu-jitsu point of view, rounds. It's the same in the Muay Thai. There'll be nights we come in, grab your mouth guards, and we just do an hour and a half of clinching. And learning to deal with that pressure and fatigue is so, so big.
Yeah, it's that Bruce Lee saying or quote. I forget how it goes, Kyle. I don't fear the man who's practiced 10,000 techniques, but I fear the man who's practiced one technique
One kick
10,000
10,000
times.
times. Yep.
Yeah, yeah, and it's so true. Going back to Hodger Gracie, and when his matches where he wins by basic fundamentals, cross collar choke, Ezekiel choke, things like that. You just can't beat the basics, mate. What do you think has been some lessons that you've learned throughout your whole entire martial arts journey to help you overcome obstacles and get through adversity? I'm the same as Richard Norton when he said this to me once. He said to me, "Thing good that has happened in my life is through practicing martial arts," and I'm the same, mate. I owe everything to martial arts. But
Yeah.
what has been some lessons that you've extracted from your martial arts journey?
I have learned, well, I mean, I've been doing it so long, I can't imagine what my life would be like not doing it. I guess the thing is for me, everything I have is from martial arts. My best mates all trained or still train. I met my wife. I have if I didn't meet my wife, I wouldn't have my kids. I have lifelong friends. I have so many things that martial arts has given me. It's just it's a purpose. It's I guess it's hard to put into words because you do get a little bit, emotional or philosophical about it. I just think it's extended so much past, like I said, that 15-year-old kid wanted to learn how to fight. I'd like to think that I can do that now. So there's a reason, like the reason I stay now is for the people. Our biggest asset at our club is our community.
Yeah.
It's funny how I think we forget how much something can give us by just being involved in it. And I think it's given me everything. I can't put it more into words. Everything I basically have in life, I can somehow relate back to martial arts. It's
Yeah.
helped me on my brightest days. It's helped me on my darkest days. Like it's taught me that there's always a way out. It's taught me that losing isn't always an option. It's taught me that you can always reinvent yourself. It's taught me that there's so much to learn. And I think that's why getting your kids involved in it, a 15-year-old kid walking into a taekwondo club at a community hall, man, I didn't think I'd be here. Like
Yeah.
I talk to people I went
What?
to high school with. It's they will stop and say to me like, Reber, you are doing stuff that we never thought you'd do. I said, fuck me too. Yeah.
That's amazing, mate. What a remarkable journey you've been on, Kyle. And yeah, it's just so resonating, for me to hear that because I'm the same, mate. I owe everything to martial arts and what it's done for me. Here I am 30 plus years later, acquired black belts in multiple systems myself. And yeah, I owe everything to martial arts. And it's just made me such a better person. It's made me kinder. It's made me more benevolent. It's made me more empathetic. It's made me just do more for the community. It just
Yeah.
makes me want to achieve more. And you'd be the same, mate. You would just have such a huge impact on the community, but for what martial arts has done for you.
I think the big thing I've learned is with the martial arts is it's okay to be human. I think, and you've got to understand that you're constantly a work in progress. I will be the first person to say that I am far from perfect. I will be the first person to say that, like, I've spoken to other people so much about things like the imposter syndrome. Like I'll take a class, I'll take a seminar, sometimes in another country, and the first thing that's going through my head is like, oh, they're going to hate this. Like, and, it's that thing where you put that, and I have other mentors like a guy called Billy Monet, who's another mentor of mine. 65 odd years of martial arts. I was teaching a seminar. I was backing off with him in a seminar in New Zealand about 7 years ago. He taught his seminar, and the first thing he did when he walked up to me, he went, "Do you think that was okay? Do you think they liked it?" I said, "You're Billy fucking Monet."
Oh,
I said, "You could
wow.
fart and they don't fucking just open your mouth." You're like, they don't care. So, and I said, "How do you reckon I feel? I got to follow on the back of that."
Yeah.
So I think that's the thing that I've probably taken away in the last 10 years. And and you would have seen them too. There are a lot of very accomplished martial artists out there who, I guess, without pigeonholing them, they let themselves down by making or wanting people to believe that they're infallible.
Yeah.
If you really want to be a good coach, if you really want to be a person that you want to have an impact on people, show them that you're human. And I've fallen into that trap over the years. I'll be the first to admit it. Show them that you're human and show them that you're as willing to fail in here as they are. Like I
Yeah.
am, I'm
Yeah.
still rolling with my guys. My body has its issues. I'm still working with my guys. I'm still doing the best that I can. And I love nothing more than having this 19-year-old purple belt or like, going his hardest on me. And sometimes I'll be the first to say they either catch me or they have me on the back foot. And at the end, I'll just go,
Yeah.
that's cool, man. Because you know what, like
Yeah,
I
it's the name
know,
of the game.
yep. And I've got a black belt of mine. He's a few years younger than me. We go tit for tat. He'll get me, I get him. He'll get me, I get him. And then, we sit down afterwards and have a chat and have a debrief. That's what martial arts is to me. If you're trying to go into the gym every night and be the best and be the alpha, it's not that you don't get it, you just don't get it yet. There'll be something that will happen that will wake you up to. It's like someone once said to me, you don't have to do this, you get to do this. I'm just happy to be still able to do what I'm doing.
Yeah, it does, mate. Martial arts teaches you that humility. When I got my Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, it's as cliche and corny as it sounds. You tip your cup out and then you start from scratch. It feels like you're putting on a white belt, and
100%.
you understand that there's always going to be someone better than you. But more importantly, as a coach, you learn so much from your students. And I can think of numerous times where my students have made an impression on me. And I'm thinking, holy shit, I like the way that they said that. I might start integrating that into coaching and teaching, And yeah, I love that, mate. I love that you're still able to roll and connect with your students, and the
Yeah,
camaraderie and the friendship and everything that you do.
I think it's just that
Yeah, it's amazing.
it's like and you would have it too. You're sitting there and you're just going, I can't believe that I'm doing this. Like I used to have it with security. Like you'd be sitting there watching a band rehearse, and you go, this band was on a poster on my wall as a teenager, and now I'm sitting in in their band room watching them do a sound check. But then to martial arts, who's an example? Well, Richard's an example. I spoke to Richard at length last week, and you still have that moment where you go, you know, and I have the joke with him. I said, you know that when I was like 15, I used to have a picture of you on my wall without a shirt on, holding a pair of size from Sword of Bushido. And he goes, who was I beside? I said, there were no one hot. It was a band or something. It was fine. But like now you're sitting, you go like, we had a Sistema seminar with our mentor that we have from overseas in February this year, and Richard and I partnered up for that for like the whole of one day. And yeah, every now and then you stop, and it's kind of hard not to fanboy, and you go, these people are now, they're my friends, and
Yeah.
that's, I think, the thing that you forget about how many relationships you form. And yeah, every now and then you will take that to granted. You will just assume
Yeah.
maybe those people are going to be around forever. But man, I always say there's a difference between friends and mates. A friend is somebody that you just have on Facebook or you walk past and say g'day to. A mate is somebody that you call at 2 a.m. and you say, I need your help. And they will say, where do I need to be? And do I need to bring my own shovel? And all my mates, all my mates do martial arts.
Yeah.
All my mates are
Yeah.
martial artists.
And this is the ripple effect that martial arts has, Kyle. This is how you and I are connecting right now.
Mm,
And I just connect with people in martial arts. I just get martial artists. I understand the triumphs and the tribulations and the adversity and the obstacles that each and every person that trains in martial arts has to overcome. And yeah, it just brings people together. And mate, what a remarkable achievement. And what a fantastic role model you are to all these individuals
thank
that
you.
you coach and teach throughout the years, mate. And it
Thank
was
you.
just such a huge honor and privilege to sit down with you, mate, and just talk about all things martial arts. And
I
I know,
appreciate it.
mate, we're going to connect in the future.
Yeah,
And
for sure.
before you before you jump off, mate, What do you hope to contribute to society in the future through martial arts?
I had this chat to someone recently. I want to leave a legacy. I've had a lot of lessons, I guess, and a lot of experiences over my years of how finite life is, how things can change in life very quickly. I want to be able to leave people with something that will keep them alive, but just will stick with them. And if that's just one, like I said, that kid you run into at Coles, that one episode that when he's having a bad day, he goes, fucking, I remember that kid that I spoke about that plays rugby sevens now. She had a tournament coming up, and one of my coach commented, "Good luck," and she commented back, and she went, "Thanks. I'll channel a little bit of Sensei Kyle for this one," and that just is a cool feeling. I just want to leave a legacy. I'm not going to be here forever.
I love that, mate.
Yeah, I'm fully comfortable with that. I'm sure you've probably read your share of philosophy, and I love Stoicism. One thing I love about the Stoic stuff is people think they're quite dreary because they talk about death all the time. They're talking about death because they're not afraid to die. And I think anyone who's afraid of dying is losing the chance to really live. So I'm the guy who bites off more than he can chew. I'm the guy who tries to be like yesterday, be two places at once. Because, I just want to leave something behind. So, I want to leave a legacy.
I love that, mate.
Thank you.
Mate, goosebumps again. Goosebumps again, Kyle.
You put a jumper on.
Mate, thank you so much for taking the time to sit
welcome.
down and have a chat, mate. It was such an honour to have you on the podcast, Kyle. Where can people find you, Kyle? You're on the socials. Where can people find you?
So our gym is CMA. Our Instagram tag is @JustBackYourself. You can find me on Instagram as well @Kyl Reber, KYLREBER. There's no E. Blame my mother for that. Facebook is just CMA-Chikara Martial Arts. We're in Corinda in Brisbane. Yeah, and we're not going anywhere.
I love it, mate. And for those people that have just listened to this, get your ass down to Chikara Martial Arts and train with Kyl Reber. You will not regret this.
Thanks,
Fantastic,
James. I really
mate.
appreciate this.
Thank you so much, Kyle, mate, and we will chat soon.
Thank you. Thanks, mate.
See you, mate.
See you later.